Hey, how's it going? Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to another beautiful... Well, if you're on the East Coast, I can tell you it's absolutely beautiful here today. It's crisp. It's like a picturesque, perfect autumn day. You know, it's like the sun is shining, so it's warm in the sun. It's the kind of weather where you'd like wear a sweatshirt, maybe emblazoned with your favorite like football team on it. You know, you'd wear a pair and you'd go outside with that and a pair of shorts, have a football catch, hopefully with someone that you love. It's just a beautiful day. My wife is actually participating today in a thing called the Great Saunter, which is a walk around the island of Manhattan. It takes a long time because it's like 32 miles. And it starts and stops at this place called the Francis Tavern, which is like the oldest building in Manhattan. But it basically means that alcohol is a part of this saunter around. Like, you can't really saunter if you're sober. You know what I mean? Like, if you saw somebody sauntering and alcohol wasn't involved, my advice would be to stay away from that person because clearly they have a lot to unpack, you know? Jeff, how are the levels? Oh man, look at everybody filtering in. It's great. Hello, Amanda and Renee. Quinn is here. Randy, happy Sunday. Well, the music has turned introspective, and we're getting ready for the big dissolve. I can only get through this because I know Randy has my support. I got so emotional about this dissolve, Randy, that I was just stumbling over myself. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Logic Live. My name is Andy. I'm very excited for today's show. This is Logic Live number 64, believe it or not. It seems like only yesterday that we were going to be home for 2 weeks, and it would be fun to have like a little virtual user group. But here we are. Anyway, let's dive right into it, shall we? Today, we're going to be doing Managing Your Studio with Nim V5. But before we start, let's give a shout out to our friends at Synesys.io, solutions development, integration, and support. As you all know, I love these guys at Synesys. They have supported me at Lively for over 15 years, and the key word in that forward description there is integration. Not only do they help us figure out what it is we need to adapt to an ever-changing world, they help us figure out how to integrate it into our workflow so we can get the most for our dollar. I want to thank them for supporting not only Logic Live, but Flame Artists since 1997. Thank you, Synesys. Also, a shout out to AJA. I believe they have an announcement coming up soon. I'm teasing this announcement now. But AJA and Flame have been together since 2006, and they've always been supporters of everything that we've done at Logic here. I mean, just in the last 2 years, not only that, but all the live events that we held, the events at NAB and things like that, they were always sponsors of prizes. And we just want to thank them for their continued support of the Flame community. If anyone out there is in the market for anything from Boris FX in the world of image processing plugins, please be sure to use the Logic.tv discount code. You can save 15% on any Boris FX product, standalone or subscription, when you use the code Logic-15 at checkout. And if anyone is in need of technical support services, please give Tom and Tom at Gunpowder a shout. These guys are great. They can help you with anything you need, either on premises or in the cloud. info@gunpowder.tech. And by the way, in case y'all haven't heard or seen me, we've got merch. The merch store is open. You can head on over to logic.tv, click on the merch button, and outfit yourself in some of this finery. You always want to look your best whenever you're either sitting there pondering your life choices or perhaps waiting for a render to finish. And you can do that with some merch from the Logic TV store. And we want to take this opportunity to thank our patrons on Patreon. We added some more this week. Randy, the list is growing. We're close to needing a second page, damn it. I want to thank everyone for supporting what we're doing here at Logic. And for as little as $5 a month, you can gain access to some exclusive content, some great merch, and discounts. We have 3 different levels of support available up on Patreon. So please check that out at patreon.com/LogicTV and become a patron today. Very exciting things started this past week or so. We've had a Discord server set up as part of the forum, and the amazing Amanda Elliott has started doing pretty much daily conversations on Discord. So if you want to, I participated in one, or I just checked in one on Friday, and it was like for over an hour and a half, we were just having an audio chat about everything, about the business, about what we were working on. It was just wonderful. So if you'd like to be a part of the conversation with some very like-minded individuals, you can just make sure you're a member at the forum at forum.logic.tv. Click on the Discord link and go check it out. It's just a kind of a drop-in thing. You'll just see everyone live there. Actually, I'm sorry. When you first hit the Discord server, you'll only have access to like a restricted area called access. When that happens, though, our dear friend Jeff Kyle will see that you're double check, make sure you're a member on the forum, and then grant you full access, and then boom, you're ready to go. But Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I believe there have been comments going back and forth or conversations going back and forth at all hours of the day, right? Day and night. It was like it was way after midnight here in New York, and you were chatting with John in Sydney, who was, it was probably 2 p.m, 6 days earlier or something like that, wherever he lives. But please check it out. Please be a part of the conversation on the Discord server, and you can check that out at forum.logic.tv. Speaking of the forum, happy Cake Days to everybody. The forum turned 1 about a couple of months ago, and we want to just thank everybody for their participation. And of course, huge hugs and kisses to Randy for getting this up and running and keeping it going. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the forum. And I don't know if you've seen or heard, but we have some new classes offered at Logic Academy. We have 3 to be specific. The first is an excellent 2-parter on the image node workflow from the lovely and talented Jeff Kyle. If you haven't seen his 3-parter on the connected conform workflow, I highly recommend you check it out. Jeff has just a gift for explaining things that are complicated in ways that are very, very simple. He also makes sure that he presents everything kind of through the lens of real world problems, like things you might hit along the way. That he's just taken from his experience. So this is a 2-parter. The first part is an overview of the image node workflow. The second part deals with a beauty workflow, a color grading workflow, and then just some extra tips and tricks. And we then have 2 from our friend Randy. The first is called 8-Minute Aces. If you've ever been intimidated by the whole concept of color management, and really, who hasn't been intimidated by the whole concept of color management, this is the solution for you, 8-Minute Aces. And also, Randy did a little intro to NDI video. It's just a wonderful look at using NDI and tools like OBS to do live streams of your flame to wherever you need them to go. And Randy shows you like a bunch of the gotchas, what to do, or how to handle audio, also streaming to like iPads, Apple TVs, and all other kinds of devices. So thank you very much, Randy and Jeff. And we want to give a shout out to our friends at Autodesk who did sponsor these 3 installments of Logic Academy. They're available now at logic.tv. They're available for free. And in the case of the image node, the footage that Jeff used is available as a free download as well, so you can follow along. Also, I want to give just a holler to our friend Grant K and just let everyone know the latest from the Flame Learning channel. This is Flame Capsule number 49, and we've all run into this, right? You've gone ahead and done your conform, you've consolidated your handles, and then all of a sudden, believe it or not, the cut changed and you need 6 more frames at the head and 2 more at the tail. This is a little tip here on how to add those frames back to shots that you already consolidated. God bless you, Grant K, because this comes up maybe about once a week for me. And finally, mark your calendars, friends, next Sunday, that's October 10th at 2 p.m., in honor of the NAB that almost was, we're going to have a virtual NAB. Sorry, I see Andrew laughing in my little preview window here. We're going to have a virtual NAB user group meeting. It's going to be on Zoom. It's just going to be a kind of like what we did a few weeks ago with what's everyone working on. It'll be a great way to have conversation and just kind of catch up with everybody the way that we used to do when we would go to in-person trade shows. But also, we've got some great presentations lined up. I'll announce the lineup later this week. We're going to be showing off some new merch, some new Logic merch that we're very excited about. And Randy and I have a very big surprise for y'all. So please tune in next Sunday, October 10th at 2 p.m. Later on today, I'll put out the sign up, or I'll start circulating the sign up for it as well. All right, let me bring myself back up here, and we'll get this show rolling. One of the most overused and underappreciated phrases in our business has got to be that information is everything. With so many moving pieces, from people to hardware to the schedule and client comments, the status of all your files, shots, and renders, information is everything. And let's not forget the financial side of the business too. Bidding, billing, actualization, utilization. Having one solution to manage every aspect of your studio has never been more important. Today, we're going to take a look at one such solution. That's Nim version 5 from Nim Labs. I checked out Nim a couple of years ago and was very impressed with its ease of use and built-in integration with Flame and other apps that we used in production. Joining us today, all the way from Los Angeles, and let me make sure I unmute him. There we go. Joining us today, all the way from Los Angeles, California, is the co-founder of Nim Labs, Andrew Sinagra. Andrew, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh my God, it worked. Okay, before the show, Andrew and I were commiserating about, like the every day, like you fire up OBS and audio doesn't work, and that's kind of become the bane of our existence.
Yeah, I know. Usually that, or I actually mute myself and talk for 5 minutes before I realize someone in chat's like, "Hey, you're muted." I'm like,
"That's beautiful."
You missed the best wisdom I ever dished out.
Oh man, it's like I never identified more with my parents than when I tried to be an internet personality here and run a show and try to make the technology work and start banging on keys and buttons and then cursing the universe. Yep. Wonderful. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the origins of Nim, and
sure,
we'll go from there.
Okay. Nim was actually started as an internal tool at a company called Entropic. I've actually been with Entropic for 18 years now. Technically still a creative director there, although Nim has definitely taken over my life. It was something that we developed. I started with Nate, who's the owner of Entropic. Many of you probably know Nate. We were small at the time. I was running CG, Nate was on Flame, and we were expanding rapidly. And we were quickly realizing that spreadsheets weren't going to cut it. So we wrote our own tool, mainly just to track shots. And this was before there were any other solutions. Like there was nothing you could even buy. So we just took it upon ourselves to go through and write something to just start track our jobs and track our shots. And then that quickly evolved to, okay, task assignments. Okay, great. Now we can track notes. And that started expanding. And over a period of times, we realized all of this information that we had for tracking our tasks, we were then also still writing on sheets of paper to track our time cards so we could hand that off to finances to actually get everybody paid. And so we're like, well, we have all this information. We know what everybody's doing. We're already tracking all this. It makes sense to build all of the financial tools into this same set of tools. And so that's when we actually really started to truly take it out of a list of spreadsheets and turn it into what was really an application at the time. And granted, then it was still our own internal application. But we went through, we added bidding, we added time cards. That's when we added job actualization. And then that gave us the leverage to get studio-wide actualization and see all of the information across all the jobs and really get a better idea of how the studio is doing at a whole at any point in time, not just when we went back to accounting and we were reconciling invoices. So as that happened, we started to have, a lot of freelancers, producers and artists come through the studio and ask us, hey, is this something we can use at our facility? And at the time we're like, no, this is just our own thing internally. But it kept happening over and over and over again. And literally after a few years of that happening, we're like, okay, maybe we should turn this into a product. So that's when we decided to start Nim Labs. And we literally we took our knowledge of what we wrote internally, rewrote it from the ground up to be productized as what you see today in Nim. And Nim, if anyone's ever wondering why we called it Nim, it's because it originally stood for Entropic Internal Management. And we were going to change the name when we productized it, but everybody said they liked it, so we kept it. And so now you got Nim.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love it. All right, well, let's dive in. Let's take a look at Nim.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who are not familiar with Nim, Nim is actually a studio management software. So what we handle is everything from bidding, scheduling, time cards, job actualization, all the way through shot tracking, task assignment, creative review, file versioning. We're integrated with many of the applications: Maya, Max, Houdini, Cinema 4D, Flame, Premiere, Nuke Studio. Feel like I'm forgetting one, but also we're directly integrated with ThinkBox Deadline as well. So all your renders will automatically get logged through the pipeline tools and come right back into Nim, which is great. So,
but actually, Andrew, before we go any further, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you do have a question for Andrew, just go ahead and put it in the comments, and I'll make sure that he sees it as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what you're going to see here today is the admin view of Nim. Now, everything is controlled directly through the admin section here. And so the way you manage what people have access to see is through permission groups. And I just want to touch on this quickly because a lot of people see every menu option. And I want people to know that if you have an artist or freelancer that's coming in and working in Nim, they're not going to see the financials. They're not going to see the bidding. It's all based on whatever you choose. And so you can see we have a ton of options here on the side under these three tabs that determine what each user permission group has access to do. So you can create whatever ones you like. These names are really just whatever you want them to be. And so you can create specific permissions for your users so they only see the menu items and have access to the items that you want. Similarly, we have security groups. Now, security groups provide access to specific objects in them. So you can attach a security group to a job. You can attach it to an asset or a shot. You can attach it to a custom field. You can attach it to a custom link. So for example, if you're working on a Black Ops project and you want somebody working on, say, a graphics package, but they don't need to be disclosed on what the product is. They don't need to see the asset. You can segment that off with security groups. And then even though people are on the same project, same job, they won't necessarily be able to see all the same information. So just wanted to touch on that before we dive into everything, because Nim is what I call a very wide product. So it's really designed so that, in our business, everybody wears lots of hats, right? So if you do have a targeted person that comes in, say a freelancer that's just working on, say, lighting, they may come in, they're only going to see the stuff that's relevant to them. You may have someone higher up the chain that is literally looking at everything from bidding and your studio-wide information all the way through the tasks in the creative review process. So that's why we built Nim the way we did, where you decide who has access to what information. So let's go ahead and jump into this. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to jump into a job and show you what information is available in Nim. If anybody has any specific questions about how any of this actually works, or how would you actually create this, just drop it in chat. Andy will let me know and we can dive into it a little bit further. But I told Andy earlier, sometimes I can actually go down the Nim rabbit hole with all the stuff you can do. So I'm trying to be respectful over time here. So with Nim 5, if some of you have seen Nim in the past and haven't seen Nim 5, we did do a refresh to the UI. So one of our goals for that was to bring a lot of information to the surface. So for example, here on jobs, we've got our color indicators for our job status. We can see how many tasks I've been assigned on this job and what my task statuses are, as well as how much time is left on each of these jobs and what the total amount of time allocated for those jobs were, along with their start and end date. A big change that we made was on the user's dashboard. If I'm an artist and I've been assigned tasks on multiple jobs and I'm working on them concurrently, these used to just be links to take you into those jobs, but you would then have to jump around between jobs. And we didn't want people to be able to do that just to create and add notes onto a task. So now you can step into all of your tasks straight from your dashboard across jobs. Look at any of your notes, your review items, your renders that you may have been uploaded, and just create new notes and more update your information directly from your dashboard without having to go into every single job. So this ends up just being one of those minor quality of life improvements that's actually I've seen make a big change in a lot of studios.
That's actually a major quality of life improvement because there are other project management apps that you do need to dive into each job. And I don't know about anybody else on the chat here, but I'm usually on a half a dozen jobs at the same time in some capacity. So
yeah, that was exactly, it was one of those things where I was frustrated with this, just doing this on a daily basis. So I was I knew that has to change. And that is something that you're going to see more from Nim in the future, of bringing that information to the surface in consolidated views. Because we understand that people like yourself are working across multiple jobs all at once, and you don't want to have to be jumping back and forth. And you really, from a personal standpoint, are trying to manage all of this simultaneously. So having that information in separate places isn't necessarily the most efficient. We do have creative review. So this is the dashboard for creative review. Creative review exists in multiple levels. So I'm looking at all the items that are relevant to myself. But if I step into a job, we have job level creative review. There's creative review at the show level, shot level, and task level. Quickly, I'll just take a look at this. So like any other kind of whiteboarding tool set, I can go ahead, I can play this video. I can stop at any frame, and then we have tools for whiteboarding. I can adjust my line thickness. I can make a little circle on here. And then I can save this, say, make this more yellow. So now we have built-in email notifications. So if you have your email notifications set up, someone will actually receive an email with that image on it, along with your note. They also get a pop-up at the top here. And in these notes, I didn't get a pop-up because I wrote a note to myself, but normally someone would get a pop-up inside the frame here, and you'd be able to see this note. I'd be able to respond to it. Okay, I'll fix this. And that person will receive that response. And then you could even go through and mark these items as addressed. And if I wanted to have this, say this was inside a job, I can click on this link and it would take me directly to the place that that item existed. And we have some other nice features in here too, where you can be playing. And if you want, you can actually like zoom into part of it and be moving it around as you're, as you're actually working. So if you're like focused on a specific area and you just want to see how that works, you can actually do that as well. We also track multiple versions inside of review. So for example, this one has a 16 on it. If I open up the versions, I can see all of the associated versions with this review item. So as you update them, you do have the option to have it auto version stack. So based on your naming convention, it'll go through and actually stack all these review items together, so you could see all, you could step in and see all your previous items along with their individual notes for each item. They also have their own user-defined types, statuses, and you can add keywords to them, which allows you to create almost like element libraries if you wish. We do have companies that have created like a library job, and you can create separate bins for each of those. And then you can just take this item, drag it into a bin. I'll just drop it up in here. And then you can actually name these bins as whatever you want. Maybe this is like your car reel or something like that. But then we also have filters that you can save and reuse. So if I wanted to create, say, a keyword filter, I can create a keyword filter for cars, choose that. Here's all of my items tagged with cars. And then I could go ahead and save that to my review. And then here here's all my pre-saved filters. So if I wanted to see all my items that were marked for reference or all the ones that were pending review, I can get to those items quickly. And this works the same way in all of the context for review. So now that we've kind of looked at the main points on the dashboard, because this section for notes is really the same as here, it's just that this is a wider view on your dashboard. These notes are available from anywhere inside of Nim, no matter where you're at. I'm going to go ahead and jump into a job. So I have a job here already, and on my job dashboard, I've got all of my production information. You could add your own custom fields. I've got a quick overview of who is on my crew. I could add job notes. So for example, before the job even starts, maybe I'm on a fact-finding call or my first creative call with my client, I can go ahead and add that information. You have multiple groups of information here, and you can just add to that conversation by hitting plus and just typing in a new item. And again, as I mentioned, we do have in-job review. One of the things with Nim is we do manage your project structures. So tying directly into the connectors, we actually have a project structure template that you create. If anybody's familiar with, say, templates for export templates in Nuke Studio, it's very similar to that. You go through a drag and drop interface in the admin section, you go ahead and create your folder structure. There are special folder structures that give instructions to the connectors of where files are supposed to go. And you add all of your servers as server definitions inside of Nim. Once you do that, you can add your servers to the job. So in this case, I have actually 2 servers connected here. And the example that I tend to use is, so at Entropic, we have offices in London, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Vietnam. And so I may start a job in LA, and a month into the project, oh, we need someone in San Francisco working on this job, and I need that folder structure available to them in the San Francisco server. I can go through, I can add that server to the job, and then Nim will automatically create the folder structure. And when we look at how the Flame connector works, I'll walk through the process of actually bringing it online, and you'll see how that happens. But I can add that server after the fact, and Nim will keep those folders in sync. Now, we're not moving media back and forth between those servers, but you will have the same folder tree. So if you do move elements around, they will have the same relative paths available to them. For the project structures that you define, there are multiple project structures available for you to create. So you can create as many folder project structures as you like. So for example, if you're working on a VFX job versus editorial job versus, whatever, maybe it's just live action, you may not need the same type of folder structure or want the same type of folder structure. So you can choose that when you bring the job online, and then you can go ahead and mark that online.
I remember when we tried out Nim, our sysadmins were concerned initially about, we have a very rigid pipelined folder structure. And what was great is what we were able to do is create one for Nim just in a folder in our existing structure and try everything out. And it all completely worked. And if we needed to migrate over to something else, we could migrate over to something else. But it was pretty seamless when we tried it out.
Yeah, we try to keep it as flexible as possible, and that's kind of the rule throughout Nim as well, because we understand everybody works in a lot of different ways. What we didn't want to do with any of this is impose as few hard rules as possible, to keep everything working, because you never know the way people are going to want to actually structure everything. The one thing that's actually been great, and this is a total aside from Nim, of just being in this position now of working with companies all over the world, is I get to see how everybody works. And it's really interesting. I mean, there are definitely people that are doing things in their own way, but we're all solving the same problem, and we're all getting to the same endpoint. We're really just kind of taking different paths to get there. But because we're all really trying to solve the same problem, you can unify a lot of those processes. So it's actually been really interesting for me to see, even just coming from the production side of things, where I was a creative director, and obviously I was with Entropic for 18 years, so I don't get out much.
Now we don't get out at all.
Yeah, it's like I never had that career where I was a freelancer and went from studio to studio to studio. So, my exposure to all these different pipelines has really been through Nim. So it's actually been fantastic from that standpoint. All right, let me get back to it, because we got a lot to look at here. One of the things that I wanted to show you is shows. You can think of a show as really just a group of shots, and you can actually change the label for that. You can change it to whatever you want. So not everybody works as shows. These could be episodes, they could be sequences, they could be edits. It's really and even then, in the case of shots, it's really anything that you want. It's really just a group of objects that have tasks to get them done. So I see some people, sometimes they get a little hung up on, well, what's a show? We don't use shows. And it doesn't, don't get hung up on the name so much. It's really just about understanding that what a show is just a group of shots. A shot is just an object that has a collection of tasks assigned to it. So we work with companies from inside the post-production industry, visual effects, editorial. We work with audio companies. We are in product design companies. We're in architecture. So we actually have facilities that span a broad range of disciplines. And so not everybody is really tied to the VFX pipelines. So you can use this however you like. So one of the things I'm going to show you quickly is, so this is the crew. So when you add crew to a job, it gives you access to assign them to a task, but also it brings over their rate information. So we have a bunch of people here. There are multiple rate types. So for example, we have day rates, hourly rates, and fixed rates. We're also multi-currency aware. So you can have individual users in their own currency. You have studio-wide currency. And so when you're looking at the studio-wide financials, all the jobs, all your margins and all the information is actually converted to your studio-wide currency. You can have a per job currency. And so when you're looking at your job actuals, they're converted to the job currency. Then you could have currency per bid, per expense, per invoice, as well as per crew member. So we give you the most amount of flexibility to kind of work in whatever native currency you are, even if you're spanning multiple countries. One of the new features that we added recently is Payroll. And Payroll is basically our rules-based time actualization system. Our old actualization system, which we still have and you can still use and is still what you start working with out of the box, works off of these overtime and double time hours. So for example, after 10 hours during the week, this person would kick into overtime 1 rates. After 12, this person would kick into overtime 2 rates. And then we have separate rates for Saturday and Sunday. What Payroll does is it allows you to define rules. So those rules can be much more specific. Let's say you guarantee a user 8 hours if they work anything less than 8. So you can say, if a user works less than 8 hours, we adjust the hours to 8. You can do things like, if a user works 6 days in a row consecutively, the 7th day is automatic double time. So you can create all these complex rule systems and then assign users to those payroll groups. And then you can see here the hours are grayed out because it doesn't really look at it based off of these hourly triggers. What it looks is at your pay period and then figures out how that person needs to be paid. And then we have a whole separate section in our finance section where you can reconcile each pay period and then kick that information out directly to your payroll service. That could be a whole hour-long talk in itself, so I'm not going to go too much more into it, but it is a brand new feature for NIM 5, so if you guys are interested in that, definitely check it out. We do have calendars, and I'm just going to have to actually, I believe it's in postings. I'm going to back this up because most of my data is from earlier in the year. Actually, it was this guy. There we go. So we do have posting calendars, and these are generally the types of calendars you would create when you're creating a bid for a client and you want to kick out a calendar. You can go through, it works just like iCal, create a new event. You can select, I'm doing 2D animation during this period of time. I can go ahead and drag that out. And I can export this to iCal, but I can also create a PDF. So just to give you an example, here's what the PDF will look like. And then you can go through and actually send that to your client along with your bid. We do track media per job, and we do track media studio-wide. This comes in really handy. We rent a lot of computers when we were in an office. We would rent a lot of workstations, and we'd have multiple jobs going simultaneously, a lot of freelance producers coming in and out. And one of the things we would do is we would log those rented computers in as a new media item inside of NIM. You get a unique media ID here. And we would print that out on a label, slap it on the computer, and then you could check it in and out. And for all media items, when you check it in, you could add who tracked it or who checked it in, where it was received, where its current location is, add tracking information. So we would, at the end of a job, we would see all the computers that were still checked in and know that we would have to go and find them and check them out, either check them out and check them in on another job, or check them out and then have them returned. So this was a great way to track that information. But again, we use this for hard drives that we get in from the shoot, basically any external media that we get in for the company, we track it all through here. We even use this to track license agreements. And now we're going to get into more of the meat of things. So we're going to start with bidding. And I'm not going to go through of creating a bid, but I'll show you what information we have on bidding. So when we look at a bid, you can see I've got this bid here and it's highlighted green. And then over here, I've got 2 versions. So I've got version 1 and version 2. So this is essentially a bid group. And then we have multiple versions inside of our bid. So I could start working up a bid, make changes, make a new version, and track all of my versions. All of this information stays in NIM. And it also stays through historically. NIM is really designed so that you never get rid of your information. So if you wanted to go back and look at any of your old bids or look at something from 2-3 years ago, all of that information is going to be there. You're going to be able to look at it just as it was when you created it. We do have our estimates here with all of our individual items. They're currently organized by category. You can do things like organize them by item numbers. So in this case, what I did was I changed all of my item numbers to shot names and asset names. So I essentially get a bid that is bid per shot in this way. And then I can, similarly to our calendars, I can kick that out to a PDF, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here's our PDF. You can add your own headers, and you can actually have multiple headers. We've got our default information up at the top. We have a comment section. We have an overview, which is the subtotal of each of our sections. And in this case, because I was grouping by my shots, I basically get a subtotal of my shot costs. We have statement of work, estimates. So this is our estimate breakdown. You define what actually shows up on this estimate. So if you didn't want to show any discount or markup or adjust a rate, you could literally say modeling 5, 8750. It's really up to you. We have general assumptions as well as our terms and conditions, and all of this information is configured at the admin level, so you can create defaults that carry over for your producers to immediately start working with on any bid, and then they can modify as needed. Terms are also selectable from a dropdown, so you could have your finance team define multiple sets of terms, and then people could just quickly go through and select the terms that they need. In the export, as I just showed, we have an export to PDF. We can export a bid to Excel, but then we also have an export to ABID. And I don't know how many of you are actually working currently with ABID, but ABID is the AICP platform that is up in the cloud, and it allows you to basically export your bid out of here, ingest it into their system, and then agencies and end clients can go through and actually have a consolidated place for all of their bids when they're actually bidding and awarding projects. So you guys can definitely look more into that as well. For the bids, I mean, what I showed you was our default bid format template. We actually have, you can create your own custom templates. It's basically like creating HTML docs. So you guys can go ahead and create your own HTML form, put it on the Nim server, and basically it'll be available for you as a bid format. Now I'm going to just keep going through because we still have quite a bit to talk about.
I've been keeping track. We do have a couple of questions that are on the technical end, but I'll wait until you get into dealing with shots and versions and things like that, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no problem. Time cards, we'll look more into this at the studio-wide level, but I'll just show you. So we do have information on our time cards for time coming in for this individual job with hours per location, as well as a time breakdown of different time types. Calendars, all of my data for this job is back in 2018, so I'm going to go there. So we do have time coming in. We can see all of our individual time cards. If I click on one of these, I can see the time card that was entered by the user for this job. And the color coding here is, this is our approval process. So essentially the gray ones mean they've not been submitted. Orange has been submitted for approval. Green have been approved, and red ones have been disputed. Once you submit a time card, it does get locked. And so users can go through and submit those, get them approved. And you do have the option to say that my approved time cards won't actually affect my actuals. There's just a full list of time cards. One of the views that I actually really like the best for our time card integration is actually this day view, because it essentially gives you a heat map here, and you can quickly see which users are going into overtime, which ones are going into double time. I can click on any one of these if any of these look odd. And this guy over here with this orange tick, this actually means that there's 2 time cards submitted on the same day for different jobs. So if maybe there's some overtime I need to reconcile, or maybe this shouldn't have overtime here and I need to adjust and move the overtime over to this job, I can quickly identify and do that. We also show you crew totals with their breakdown of time types, as well as the total hours worked on the job. Quick way for you to enter expenses. So any expense entered against the job, you can log that and you define what all your expense types are. Now actuals. And again, I'm not going to give this the time it needs, but in your overview, what carries over to the actuals is the sum total of your awarded bids. So up here, I have my bid subtotal, cost, profit, and margin. I have projected cost, profit, and margin, and then what my actual subtotal, cost, profit, and margin are. I have charts for actual cost per location, hours per time, as well as I can see how much time has been entered for each of my different bid items. So I've got hours per bid item, I've got hours entered per location on the job, as well as my breakdown for users. The main difference between the bids and the projections is the bids are generally, like, your bid hard cost is generally determined by your rate card's estimated hard cost, but you're not usually taking into account the specific users that you are adding to the job. So your bid cost may actually be different than your projected cost. So with projections, what we allow you to do is enter time against users to project how much time they are specifically going to be on the job and determine what their cost is based off of their rate. And from there, you get a much more accurate projected cost and projected profit. And you can do that for any crew member you add to the project, your bid items that aren't going to have labor associated with them, expenses, individual third-party costs, as well as additional projected items if they aren't included. Your actualization now comes in from your users entering time card. So if I'm a user entering time card, I can actually just go up here to the time card widget. Let's say I want to add a time card for today. It's going to remember the last thing I did. So maybe I'm just adding more time onto this job. I can just go ahead and hit save. And now I've got a time card entered. So a user just entered their time card. Now, if this was the job that I just entered that time card for, that would show up here in this actuals value. So for example, here, if a user had entered time for modeling, that might go against my CG line item. I can see the total number of hours bid here at 500. I can see my actual hours at 619. Now it looks like I went way over, right, in hours, but in reality, I can look at my bid hard cost was 60,000. My actual hard cost only came in at 44 because maybe I was able to put more junior artists on it, use some cheaper labor than I originally thought. So it kind of gives you both perspectives. Be like, well, we spent much more time on it, but we didn't go over budget. So, maybe we're still okay there. And then we have additional places for if you have a bid item where someone didn't submit time cards for, you can put in a hard cost value. You can enter time in for expenses. For any amount that went over your expenses, let's say I wanted to bump this up by 10% markup and bill this back to the client, I can add that to my total, and it's going to go back up here and add it to my actual subtotal. You can see that number change if I toggle that on and off. I'm just going to clear this out and save that. So now, one of the nice things about entering your time cards and also creating tasks for all your users and having them enter time against those tasks, you can get an accurate breakdown of how much money is being spent per task type. So I can see per animation, I've got my actual hard cost here based off of my crew rates and the time coming in. And I can see how much time I've estimated per each individual task type. But then scrolling down, I can look at, this is my show, Escape, and you can see I've got my show here, and we'll look at that in a second. And I've got each of my shots here. So on Escape 101 or Escape 10, I've got estimated 210 total hours, and I can see the breakdown of each of my tasks. I've got my actual hours, and I've got my actual hard cost here at 17,074. So I can see how much my individual shots are actually costing me. And inside the sequence view, we can actually see if we're actually going over and running over in certain places and if we're falling behind. And just to kind of wrap up this actual section, when we look at crew, we've got our crew members. We can see their rate types, and we can see what we've actually spent on our crew member for the entire job. And now I'm going to jump over to our sequence. I'm just going to look at the time real quick. All right. Andy, cut me off when we got about 15 minutes left because I do want to look at the flame stuff.
Okay. That's about a minute from now.
Yeah, I'm gonna run through this other stuff is going to be much more familiar to people, so I think we can get through it. So these are our shots, right? And so that we'll look at some of creating this and what it looks like when we look at the flame connector. But I just wanted to touch on it briefly just to give you an overview of what information we have here. So we've got our sequence. And we've got our list view. So here's our different shots. And this is kind of our expanded view where we have all of our information. These are our tasks that have been assigned to the shot. I've got my shot notes, any review items here, as long as any renders. Now renders, you can think of render as like a rendered job, say coming out of deadline. So I've got my review items that these could be dailies or drafts when you're thinking about it in deadline terms coming out of there. As well as my raw elements. So in this case, I've had 3 EXR outputs on that render job. Now we do have a link here, and this is a web link. I currently have it set up for RV. So if I click on that, it would ask me if I want to open up RV. I'm not going to do that at the moment. But if you want to preview your actual source footage, in some type of, local player that's not going to be compressed media, because obviously anything that you're looking through the web is going to be some form of compressed movie. You can do that and get direct access to your media from there. I'm going to close those render details. And I want to make a note of the fact that, so we do have per shot notes and we do have per task notes. So the main difference is they all work the same, The main difference is through notifications, if someone adds a note to a shot, it's going to go to all the users that have a task on that shot. If I, as a supervisor, go through and add a note to somebody's task, it's only going to go to that person. Within this view, we do have a typical spreadsheet. So we've got our shot information. We do have our task view. And here you can see our progress bar. So we have estimated hours versus actual hours. And we can see, in this case, we've actually overrun. We're 213% over. Within this view,
seems like a typical job these days. Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of normal. It's kind of sad when you're like, that doesn't bother me. It's fine.
Yeah.
You can group these items however you want. So if I want to group them by shot, I can, or if I want to group these by users, or I could even like multi-group these, I can drag this up and group them even farther. I'll undo that for now. But then I'm just going to jump over to this task Gantt chart. And this will be the last thing we'll look at inside of a job. But essentially, it's the same view. We've got all of our shot information. Here's all our same tasks. But we can see this. Here's that one that's running over, and we can see it's going into dark blue. In this view, one of the nice features is you can actually select a user, and it'll show you what their throughput is. So I can say, oh, well, James is working on one thing here, but then we actually have him working on 3 things up here. And maybe that's too much for him. Maybe I need to slide some of these things around and actually spread out his time a little bit. So that's better. I can maybe balance out his workload without having to go through and just visually like scan through and be like, how many does he have on that day? So it's kind of a nice feature to do that. You can also solo that information if you want to. But in addition to the throughput chart here, so we can see how we're balancing our job, we have a burn rate chart. And so this is incredibly helpful just to figure out, is this job running away from me? So for example, here we've got our estimated time on our tasks at 40 hours during the week, and that comes down. And at the end of the week, we've done all our work. There's green coming in as time coming in time cards. And so assuming we're accurate with our estimates, we've actually completed our work, and that carries over into the following week. Here you can see we're actually carrying 36 hours over into next week. And then here we're just creating a mountain. So at this point, we're 216 hours behind. This tells you one of two things. You're either overestimating how long it's going to take on your work, because maybe these things are actually getting completed, or you severely underestimated how much time it's going to take, and you need to hire more people, and you're not in anywhere close to getting any work done. So once you kind of reach this point, this is a good opportunity for you to say, I need to reevaluate how I'm planning my projects. And so we try to give you those quick indicators, so you're not just looking through Gantt charts and things like that trying to figure out where you're at. We really want to give you as many visual indications of what it is that it we'll give you those trigger points to tell you need to go back and take a look at something. So, all right,
cool.
How much time we got left? 12 minutes?
Give or take.
Okay. All right, cool. I'm going to click on 2 more things at the studio level, and then we'll jump into Flame. So at the studio level, we're taking all of the information from the jobs and bringing that upstream. So we didn't look at it inside the job, but you can log invoices inside of a job. And that's how we can actually see our invoice total. So we have our invoices, how much has not been sent, what's in accounts receivable, what's overdue, what's been paid. And we give you this chart. And what's really nice about this, you can actually say, oh, on a regular basis, I'm carrying like 1.5 million in accounts receivable. Maybe you want to carry less than that. Maybe you didn't realize you always have that much money like laying out there. So, this is kind of a great way to kind of on a date range basis say, okay, this is how we're typically operating. You can step into the billing section and get your billing information. And so you get a billing status here, and this is based off your invoice status. So in this case, we can see that we're partially billed or we're fully billed, as well as our individual invoices. And this is where your accounting department can actually live. Your producers can see the invoices for the jobs inside the jobs themselves, but accounting can look at a studio-wide view and step in and say, oh, this is when this needs to be billed, or this is when it was sent, or this is when it was paid. So you never get into that situation where producers are like, oh, I didn't know we didn't even bill the first 50 and we just delivered this job, those types of things. And then we do have payroll, but again, that's a much longer conversation. Last thing I'm going to show you here is studio-wide actuals. So again, very similar to in-job actuals, but this is all of your information studio-wide. You can see profits per location, margin per location. This is essentially all of your financial information coming outside of your jobs up to the studio level, so you can compare how they're doing. One key thing here that I want to make sure that I talk about is profit centers. Profit centers are a way to look across jobs and across bids. So you can tag your individual line items with a profit center. So for example, if I wanted to see how well my color department is doing, this looks across those, and based off of the time cards coming in, the expenses that are logged against those items, you can actually say, oh, well, even though my jobs may have not been that profitable, my color department's killing it with a 92% margin, you know? So just a different way to kind of view how well your company is operating. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory: task information, user totals for the time period, as well as a breakdown of time cards and time spent over that area. Let's jump into Flame. I know I'm going fast. All right, so I'm going to make a brand new job here, and I'm going to call this Flame. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit save, and I'm going to open that up. And now I'm going to go into config, and the first thing I'm going to do, well, actually, I'm going to create a show. So we'll call this EPO1. And I'm going to go into my project. I'm going to add my server. I'm going to add my project structure, and then I'm going to bring the job online. It's going to say once you bring it online, that's baked in. So now you can see it actually made my folders down here. And if I go over to this page, Flame. So here's the job that it made. And so these are the default folders that come with the project structure that you defined. So whatever folders you want, these are the default ones that are getting made. You can see we don't have any shots yet. Obviously, we haven't created shots. So as shots get created, those will get added. So now I can go into, well, actually, I want to add my crew first. So I'm going to go through because I want to add my animator so I can assign a task to them. So I just dragged over my user group for my animators, and I have my sequence here. So I'm going to just jump up to my list view. You can see we don't have any shots yet. So inside of Flame, we have a Nim connector, and I have this sequence here. One of the things you want to make sure that you do is actually name your shots. So you can leave the asset name the same, but you do need to give these a sequential shot name because that's what Nim uses for the naming convention of its shots. I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to hit publish sequence. At the top here, we've got a preset. Now, this is actually a Flame export preset. You can create your own. Nim will use any one you want. What we're actually just doing is calling the Flame export. We're not doing our own custom export. We are just listening to the data from the export and logging all that information into Nim and creating some hooks for you to be able to round trip information here. So we ship with three
Flame
standard
export
templates.
preset XML file. It's
Exactly.
yeah. You just go in there and modify it as you need.
Yep. Yeah, so you can set that up however you like. So we've got our job. It's going to find the latest job I was on, server storage, what show I want to export to. Now, the other big consideration here are these. These are Nim Element Types. And so during the export, Flame exports basically 5 things. There's video out, audio out, batch effects, your batch effects open clip, your timeline open clip, as well as a batch effects file. So what these do is this tells Nim how to relate these open clips and these media types to other media types coming into Nim from other sources. So for example, my timeline in is set to my comps element type. When I render something out of Nuke and I log that in as an element with this comps element type, Nim is going to, or Flame is going to know how to create that, or Nim's going to know how to create that association in Flame and put that into the open clip. And I'll show you exactly how that works. I'm going to go ahead and export this now. So this is going to export all of our shots. And as that's exporting, I can look at our file system, and you can see it's using the project structure because we have Nim keywords in our export template, Flame export template, that tells it to use the Nim project structure and where to go. It asks Nim, hey, how do I resolve this? And then you can see all of our media coming into here. There's our batch files, our source clip. Our plates are all getting exported to the plate directory. And then our images where our renders are going to go. You can see we've got our render clip there. All right. So now I'm going to look back at Nim. And so now we've got our shots, and it brought over the shot information. And I can see if I look at my elements, I've got my open clip for my timeline, one that's associated with the comp. I've got my plates, which is the image sequence it wrote out to disk, as well as the renders clip. And if I click on files, I can actually see I've got my version 1 of my batch file here. And you can see it was batch file I exported from Flame. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open this so I can work with that. And so on my first clip here, let's say I want to create a new version. So I create a new version. I'm going to move this over and I'm going to put in a color correct node. And then let me just double click on that and I'll make it blue. And I'm going to say, I'm going to hit return. I'm going to say this is blue. And I'm going to go ahead and log that to Nim. So while this is rendering and exporting, ooh, did I hit cancel? Nope, it's doing it. So it went ahead and logged it in as blue in Nim. So you can see we actually logged our second batch file. And I'm going to go ahead. All right, oh man, this is blue too. There we go. Thank you, Flame. So it's going to head and write these out, and you'll actually see, so it'll log the batch file that saved for this version, as well as the source media. So I can go through and I can see I've got version 1 and also version 2 there. And then in Nim, I've got my elements. And then, so here's the second one that was written out. So here's my original plates that were exported, and here's my version 2 that was exported. Now, the other option is, let's say you're bringing in media from another source. So I'm not working in Flame. So I'm going to come over here to Nuke. From my plates folder, I'm just going to grab this, drag it in here, and I'll show you how the Nim connector works inside of Nuke. I'm going to just add a color correct here. We'll make this guy green. Ooh, you're green. And then I'm going to actually use a Nim write node. So Nim write nodes basically tell Nuke where to write everything based off of the project structure. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a small bit of code as a shortcut here for the demo. Normally, if you're using Deadline or something like that, Deadline can actually automatically log this render to Nim. I added a little code to just do that after my render automatically inside of here. And now under my Nim menu, I'm going to go ahead and save this to the job. So I'm going to select my Flame job. Oh, wait. No, I'm good. Select my Flame job. Now, so these are my Flame. I can see there's my Flame batch files. I'm actually going to make a new base name called Nuke and say this is green. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to go ahead and kick off that render. So we're going to render this. So as that's rendering, I'll go through. And so back in, let's go to shot 2. Go to our files. So now you can see here's my batch file originally, and now here's my Nuke file, and that got logged. And so with my note that this is green, I can come back over to here. I'm going to wait for this render to complete, and then I'll show you how we can scan for versions and actually bring that directly into Flame.
This is good. I think this is a good lead into the questions we have, because a bunch of them have to deal with exactly what you're showing.
Okay, cool. Yep. So you can see here's the output from Nuke, and that is logged with a comp element type. Now I'm going to go through, and from here I can say update open clips, scan for versions. Now it's going to go ahead with the job show, and I'm scanning for new elements. So I don't want to rescan for things that I've already found. So I'm going to go ahead and scan for this. It found one new version, and then I'm just going to click on the timeline here. Oh, there, now Flame updated. So now I've got version 1 and now version 2, and you can see it's got that Nuke base name tag. So that was automatically brought in and updated. So you can have people from really any source be logging them in. You can scan for versions and automatically update your timeline as well. Now, one of the other things we have available is, let's say you wanted to export this edit to a show for review. I can click on this. Again, these are just Flame export templates. I'll just do 960 by 540 for now. I'm going to go ahead and hit export. It's going to write this out. As soon as that's done, you're done. I'm going to go back to my show for review. And here's the clip we just did.
Cool.
Yep. And I think I made it under time.
Yep, we can get a
that's the
countdown
majority
from
of
10.
it. There's a couple other features, but that's the that's the gist of it.
That's great. Let me throw some of the questions at you that are pertaining to this. Yeah. The first was from Valentine, who was asking, is there any DaVinci Resolve integration? And I imagine the answer is, as long as DaVinci or Resolve can write something out with the same pattern and everything that OpenClip is looking for, it'll work, correct?
Well, we've been looking at Resolve, and there's a couple of things that in the Resolve API doesn't give us the same access to information during the export that we do with, say, Nuke, Premiere, and Flame, oddly enough. It's something that we've asked for. The things that we could do if we provided a connector for Resolve are basically the same thing you can set up with the existing export structure. So there isn't too much, like we're not able to resolve keywords with the project structure. There's a couple of roadblocks that we have when we're trying to resolve that, so we can deliver a built-in resolve connector. But right now we actually do not have a connector, but we're trying to work with Blackmagic on getting that to happen.
Well, Alan was wondering, are versions being created by a hook published directly out of an app or via a file system scrape? And it seems that the metadata that's in Nim happens via a hook, but the publish is, or like you showed, if you wanted to see, if you actually wanted to see versions updated in Flame, you need to do the scan for new versions, which is the file system scrape, right?
Well, so there's two different things. So for everything else, it's all via API hooks. During the export, that's all happening during the export, and Flame is actually, the Flame hooks are talking back to Nim's sending information back. But the only file system scrape we have is right here, build open clips from project. So this is assuming someone didn't log any information into into Nim. Your freelancer left, you're sitting at your Flame, it's midnight, and you're like, where are my files? You can do this build open clip from project. This will use the Nim project structure, scan through that information, and essentially build you open clips based off of the folder structure. So for each shot, you'll have a comps open clip, a render open clip, and a plates open clip, and you'll be able to just use that to that's kind of like the catch-all of like, I don't know where all my stuff is, but I'm just going to do that. Otherwise, if you use build open clip from elements, that actually uses the logged elements inside of Nim and reads that information directly there.
Gotcha. Follow up from Alan: how does Nim registration work for standalone batch comps? Like if you were working in a batch group, like up on the desktop there.
So if I go through and I promote this, say to batch effects, let me grab this clip here. And I'm working up in here. This is where those element association types were come into play. This open clip is actually associated with the render open type. Either that, or you could create new open clips. So if I went through and said I created open clips from elements, I could bring that into here, and then as those elements are updated, I can say build open clip from elements again, and it'll just update those existing open clips. So you can work with it that way.
Gotcha. I think maybe what he was asking about is using batch, like a batch group, like you have up on the desktop there, as opposed to using this in batch effects. Or does that matter?
It doesn't. So the thing will work is still that same process. You can, at any point in time, you don't even have to have done a publish. You can do these build open clip from elements and projects. Really, the publish sequence and the scan for versions is really just built into the timeline export. So if you're just working like independent of that and just like regular batch effects, you can still use these to build open clips, and that'll just be able to update your open clips from either information from disk or from Nim.
Okay, gotcha. A couple questions from our friend Finn. One is how are dailies made? If he says if I publish an EXR render from Nuke, do I need deadline to get the dailies for web review into Nim, or is there like FFmpeg running in the Nim VM to get the clip that you're watching inside of the Nim interface?
So the easiest way is something like Deadline, where it's a post-render conversion. And then, so let's say Deadline converts it to a draft and then uploads that directly to Nim. Nim does use FFmpeg to do media conversion. So you could upload, whatever, like, media format as long as it's a movie. Nim won't do a conversion. We don't have it written right now to do a conversion from like an EXR sequence. It hasn't been something that's been highly asked for where somebody would upload an EXR sequence, but what we could possibly look into would be maybe if you have an EXR sequence already logged as an element, maybe we add a button to say, hey, make a review item out of this. So that could technically be possible in the future. Right now, you would want to employ some kind of post render script to do a to do a conversion on your end before uploading, or just use like Deadline or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Finn had another question. Hold on, I bookmarked it. Yes, there it is. How are external client reviews handled? Can I create public links to versions like with Frame.io?
So this is one of the big differences between Frame.io and or a lot of other applications and Nim. Nim actually lives as a virtual machine on your network. Now your network can be on AWS, it could be on your own private infrastructure, but you handle and manage all of your data. So you can open up, let's say you had it on your own infrastructure behind a firewall. What you would need to do is just open up a port on your firewall or IP address that you would give client access to, and then you can create a client, say user, with limited access to only see review. So they would have the list of jobs that they are a part of, and then they would only see those review items. So that would probably be the best way. We don't have a cloud-based review section at the time.
Gotcha. Let's see if anyone has any other questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. I did want to definitely bring this to your attention, though, Andrew. I thought this was a pretty good comment here, and that is that the award for best microphone and voice on Logic Live goes to Andrew Sinagra, and that's from our friend Jeff Kyle. I want to make sure that wasn't overlooked. I mean, clearly this is an example of something that, as you said, you could spend an hour on each of the sections of Nim and still have things to talk about. But it's certainly a wonderful product and a wonderful look at the product. We are running a little bit over. So if anybody does have any other comments. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. One more from Finn. And that was, is there an app launcher component that can set up Nuke, Maya, etc. based on what task you launch it from, like set up environment variables, etc.? Does that make sense?
We have had people asking for that. That's something we don't have yet, but it is actually a highly requested feature, so it's something we're looking at.
All right, cool. Well, we're going to give away some prizes, and while we're doing that, if anyone does have any other questions for Andrew, please go ahead and throw them in the chat. I just saw one other name pop up in the registration list, so let me add that so we make sure we have everybody covered. And we'll move right on to Logic Live prize time, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing that I have to give away is a Logic.TV water bottle. I would just like to say I got mine in the mail. I'm in love with this as a concept. Hold on, this is probably going to kill the music, but that's okay. I love this thing. It's beautiful. It's practical, and let me tell you something. I've never been more hydrated than when this came in the mail form. So let's go back here to the list. We're going to give away a Logic.TV water bottle to one lucky winner. We'll spin the wheel here. Wheelofnames.com, ladies and gentlemen. It never lets you down. It's going to Renee. Congratulations, Renee. All right. Next up on the list, listen to the crowd go wild. Congratulations, Renee. Next up, I do have a 1-year subscription to Optics from our friends at Boris Effects. And Darren Orr. Let's give it up for Darren. Congratulations, Darren. And now I do have two 1-year subscriptions to Nim that I would like to give away. Thank you very much, Andrew, for offering those up. Okay. The first one goes to Johnny Ames. Congratulations, Johnny. And just so we can hear the clap sound effect for the fourth time, to Richard Betts. Congratulations, Richard. Woohoo! Perfect. All right. Andrew, while we were giving away prizes here on Logic Live, a couple of other questions came in. I just want to see them. Sure. I think one was from Richard, correct? He says he only uses this in... bring it on the screen. He says he only uses it in the standalone batch. There's a custom write node that has the correct Nim file. Oh, okay. I see. So you can use Nim the connectors and everything within a standalone batch group and not batch effects, provided you have the right node that has all the metadata, and when you exit or when you render through that right node, it performs the same functions that you were getting in batch effects. Cool. All right. Well, there you go. That worked out well.
Cool.
That's all the time we have here on Logic Live for this week. I want to thank you very much, Andrew. This was awesome. And right after the show, Andrew's going to chat with us over in Zoom for our Patreon patrons. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out with just a couple of slides. Well, actually, I'm going to go to a single screen. Maybe next week. I mean, that's all you can hope for, is that maybe next week we'll get it right. Okay. So coming up on Logic Live, like I said, next week, we're going to be doing our Logic virtual NAB user group. So please be a part of that. It's going to be fantastic. And 2 weeks after that, on Sunday, October 24th, we're going to take a look at Mocha Pro 2022. So the 20th anniversary, or Mocha's 20th birthday recently. And it's going to be great to have the folks from Boris FX on to show that off. I want to thank everybody who has been a part of the forum. Randy, please chime in, but I think we're close to 1,000 members on the forum now. If you haven't signed up for the forum, please do. The response times are amazing, and the conversation is lively. Speaking of a lively conversation, please, if you go over, become a member of the forum, and then when you're there, click on the Discord link and join the conversation that we're having on Discord every day. This episode of Logic Live, like all previous episodes, is going to be available on logic.tv later today. And please take a moment, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our 2 podcasts. We have 2 podcasts. One is called Ask a Flame Artist, that's hosted by Randy and MB Emmy. If you ever had a question that you wanted to ask a flame artist but were afraid to ask, head on over to Logic TV, log in your question, and Randy will make sure that it's asked. Our other podcast is called The Logic Podcast, aptly named, and it's an interview podcast. My most recent episode was with Jean-Marc Laurent. If you haven't checked it out, please do. Jean-Marc is based in Montreal, and it was just a fabulous conversation about the state of the industry and where everything's going. It was just wonderful. He's a brilliant guy. Definitely check that out. You can catch both of our podcasts in your podcatching app of choice. I updated it, Randy. We're at 1.19 thousand subscribers on the YouTube channel. It's growing every week, so thank you, everybody. And, of course, thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. We couldn't do what we do without your support. Patreon.com/LogicTV if you'd like to become a patron. If you need tech support, reach out to Tom and Tom at info@gunpowder.tech. And if you need anything from Boris FX, please be sure to take advantage of the 15% discount that we have by using the discount code Logic-15 at checkout. And finally, the aforementioned merch, right? Renee, the water bottle is headed your way. Thank you to AJA, and thank you very much to Synesys for supporting Logic Live. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, and we will see you all next time.